Hey everybody, so it's Marty, the JavaScript party, and my buddy Brett up there. Getting there all worked up. I don't know why. I guess it's just self. I don't know. I don't know why I do that, but I do, and that's something for me to think about. So yeah, so it is January 11th, and I'm in Metro Atlanta area, northern part, so in Marietta, Georgia. And what happened yesterday was we got a bunch of snow, and that was pretty cool because it's just fun. Normally, 99 times out of 100, at least 9 times out of 10, when we get snow, it's just really fun. And there's sort of certain things that happen when we get snow around here, and there's a lot that goes into it. But I'll just sort of make it brief. Basically, at 3 o'clock yesterday, I was done with work, so I went out and I shoveled my. I had bought a snow shovel a couple of years back when we got snow a previous time, because you don't need it very often, but when you need it, you need it. So I shoveled off my driveway, and the thing is what had happened was the temperature had gotten above 32 degrees, which is 0 Celsius. It's 32 Fahrenheit. It had gotten above that, so the snow started to become kind of slushy, but it was still sitting there. And what happens quite often around here is then it'll get slushy and then it'll freeze again. So what happens is there's a specific time, right? Like there's a range of time where it's just really easy just to take a shovel and just get it all off of the driveway. Most of our driveways around here are fairly steep, and we're no different. We have a steep driveway. Um, so the as the snow becomes slushy, won't it won't flow down. It still has enough friction that it won't flow down the driveway. But if you, it's very, very, very easy. It's just barely not enough friction. But if you take a a shovel to it, you could just move it right back down. So, anyways, the point is that if I was really shocked the other day when we found out that if you go to the renderer um, and you look at what a renderer does, or it's really not in here; it's in the app component. Um, that you pass it um, a div, or you pass the renderer. Okay, so it's in this animation loop, a scene and a camera. And the reason it kind of blew my mind was because I always thought that the scene was at the top of the hierarchy. But really, a renderer has a scene. A renderer has a camera. Oh, and then that was the other thing is I thought the camera was inside the scene. So the point I'm trying to get to here and how it ties back to when I um, brune or not bruned, but shoveled off the slush off my driveway is that it had I waited through the night, what I would have on my driveway right now would be a solid sheet of ice that would be almost impossible for me to get off. And not only that, but it would probably be there for a week until we drove the cars on it enough to sort of add enough to it to do that, especially if there was a layer of white on it to reflect all the energy from the sun. It's like there's a time and place that things are easy, and then there's a time and place when things are damn near impossible. And then there's times and places when it's kind of easy, not impossible, whatever. This is when it's very, very easy to understand how the renderer relates to the scene, how the renderer relates to the camera, how there is no direct relationship between the scene and the camera. The scene does not have it has no knowledge of the camera. The camera has no knowledge of the scene. They are not related. They are two completely separate things. That concept, I worked with ThreeJS for over a year. There was a time when I worked with it last time when it would have been easy to sort of cement those concepts into my brain, but I just let it pass. And that's the thing. Because one of the things that most people don't understand is like people are very impressed by how much our human brain can remember and how much it can understand. But that's really not the impressive part. The truly impressive part is how much it cannot remember and how much it cannot understand. Because honestly, 99.99999% of the information that comes to us is useless. And being able to segregate that 1% of useful information away from all the noise is absolutely impressive. And it is a fine, fine line of doing that. And I had put the relationship between the scene and the camera and the render in the scene and the render in the camera and all that. I had marked that as not useful information. I set that aside for the garbage collector, and the garbage collector came and took it. That was a mistake. I'm sure there were coding mistakes I made in that last project because I had the misunderstanding of what how these things are related to each other. And that was really on full display yesterday in yesterday's video when I worked on the unit tests, and I thought that a that this if I ran this generate ID twice, that I would then execute this branch of code because I maybe because of the way I've coded things in the past or whatever, assumed that once I had an ID that this array would be full. But this array only becomes populated when I recycle an array. And that was not that important of a thing. Like I could literally go, that should be probably in set aside for the garbage collector, right? I don't really need to know that to understand that I can recycle IDs and I can generate IDs and that blah, blah, blah. Like all that isn't necessary, but I did become aware of it because of this change. Anyways, at this point, my goal is to update the renderer service spec to actually execute um, the functions that are inside the render service. And you might be thinking, and I have definitely thought this in the past, I have 100% coverage. Why do I need to do that? And honestly, the biggest reason is because if I do something in this renderer service right now to break things, so like, I don't know, return, let's say I change this to this returns a string and return hello. And it breaks my unit tests. I hope it'll break my unit tests because it should not be able to get an ID. It wouldn't even compile, right? But let's see what. So it won't compile. So the demo didn't work. But anyways, this should have broke my unit tests, but the compiler caught it before the unit tests. And I will say that before the compile, unit tests were way, 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 way more valuable than they are now. They are still valuable, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that. I believe they're still valuable. But like as you can see, a typical thing that you might do to break things gets caught pretty quickly. And then so but the thing is had it failed, it would have failed. It would have shown an error in the app, and that would have been like a false positive. There would have been an app component failure, not a renderer service. So it'll be easier to catch these things if I do that. Also, one of the probably the biggest benefit, in my opinion, of unit tests today is that they are kind of a sort of a side effect way of documenting what your intentions were when you wrote that code. So now I should say it should return a numeric ID, right? That's what I want. And I do want to say that, like, what is happening right now with this IDE is a real pain in the buttocks, right? Like, it is, like, wrong. It is so wrong. It's saying that this isn't a function, and whenever it does give suggestions, they're wrong. And I would say that that is a sort of a thing that happens a lot in software, where like I used to, or a person that I deeply respect from that I used to work with in the past used to often say, today's patterns are tomorrow's anti-patterns. And this is an example where, like, not only is this not helpful, it's actually unhelpful, right? So, like, that's a real pain in the butt. Like, the fact that it's confused and something changed somewhere, and like there's this whole chain of things that are screwed up somewhere, and then like if I go down, I was like asking, kind of doing some research yesterday and interacting with, after my video yesterday, interacting with ChatGPT, trying to figure out, okay, how can I fix this? And it gave me like a whole bunch of things to try, but a lot of those things could actually be destructive, and I don't really want to go down that path of just down this sort of rabbit hole of something being really screwed up. I find that a lot of these things just sort of resolve themselves with time. Um, but right now, it's actually a real pain in the butt. And it's actually causing to be um, causing things to be weird. I mean, more difficult to service. No, okay, so I want to get, let's see, const dot what is this saying? Renderer ID is equal to service dot get renderer. And I probably should have called that get renderer ID, and I yeah, I should have. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So that is the whole frigging point to doing these things. Get renderer. And it's not really getting a renderer. I mean, it's getting a renderer, but create renderer. Let's change this to create renderer. And now things should break all over the place. And it even tells me, even in here, like if I go over here, I would also see it. It's saying, "Hey, man, you broke things." Um, but this one's a little bit better, I think, because it's actually telling me where it is. I don't really understand why this one is kind of just not telling me where the problem. Oh yeah, it is. It's telling me that it's on there. Okay, since I'm working over here, I'm going to use this one though. So I can hold my control button down and click on this, and it'll take me to the problem, and then I can just say dot. I believe it was create renderer. And I hit save, and that should fix everything. Should fix everything. Oh, so now it didn't fix everything because now it's broken in there. So it should have fixed everything over here, though. Okay, but it did not fix it because I have other unit tests that are now broken. So let's go here, and so this is telling me that it's broken on here. So I can hold this control button down and click here. And so this is supposed to be create renderer. And as you see, like, had this not been screwy, that would have been super obvious where the problem was. And it was actually really distracted me because I thought that was the problem. And this happens all the time. I would say in today's modern software situation that we live in as developers and even as regular consumers now trying to do stuff online, this is more the norm now. Like a lot of things that you're doing are actually like not even that useful. Like, like you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to get a link. Like I found that like with most people like under 25 today, if you interact with them and you tell them, oh, this is the name of the website or something like that, they will search for it. They won't try to go to the URL. And the reason they search for it is because there's so many weird things that can go wrong when you try to go to a URL directly, and they can just be there in 2 seconds. Like it may not be .com, it might be .net, it may be HTTP, or it may be HTTPS, or just a million different things. It's just so much easier just to do a search on Google and say the name of the thing that you want and then sort of read the description and click it. That's just a lot easier, um, because everything is all screwy. All these sorts of things are just very, very screwy. But anyway, so now we're back to 100%. Now, what we want is it to be a, and I guess, so, get render ID. And then, I don't know, to be number. Let's see if it. So it's good to make thing. Okay. Oh, and it's kind of cool. So yesterday when we were talking to ChatGPT, it told us um, that it told us that the name of these little functions here are matchers. So so I don't think if I think if I go to ChatGPT from this, it doesn't have my history, but I think that might be fine. Um, I probably want to um, have my history. I probably want this in my history because I guess my history is a bit of, there is some value to my history, um, for me. And yeah, for a very, very inquisitive individual, I guess reading this stuff, like, is zero a real number? So, like, I'm very fascinated with numbers and all that. And one thing that really blew my mind is like the word for zero. So like the number zero didn't really appear in math and in numbers until like 1500, or no, 500 AD in India. But it didn't appear in the English language, like, so zero, zero, until 1600. So just a few hundred years ago. And that is sort of interesting to me. And before that, the number zero was more referred to, the concept of the number zero was more referred to as cipher, CIFPHER, which is like in today's language, like a puzzle or something like that, a mystery, like something that needs to be solved. So like zero being cipher, I mean, that was weird. And it just goes to prove that if we went back like, if we went back like 300 years, we wouldn't even be able to understand what people are saying because the words have all shifted meaning so much. But anyways, that is not what we're here for. But it does give some insight into what is the matcher. So I think it uses sort of this context to know, for is numeric. Question mark. So I think if I had done that from a fresh ChatGPT, it wouldn't know. In Jasmine. I guess it did not use that in Jasmine. And enter didn't work. Too many concurrent requests. Regenerate. I would imagine that means from other people. Oh, so I guess is um, so maybe it's saying there isn't one. Um, so how do you check it? Existing Jasmine matcher to determine if a value is numeric. Okay, so it kind of looks like what I should do. Oh, I guess that's a good way. Is say is okay. So I don't want to create a custom matcher to match. Can be used to equal to be true. True. And then I guess it's saying I could say is not is nan number. Number. I think this makes sense. I'm not like super like this doesn't feel like super like natural to me. It looks like I need one more parentheses to be true. Let's see what we get here. Ooh, how did we lose? It's so weird. I feel like we were all hundreds before, weren't we? Let me see. How in the world did we lose by adding a... Okay, I guess the easiest way to deal with this is, let's go to my other, let's pull this off. What is going on here? Is this the one I want? Coverage. This, I think this is the one I want. Drag that over. So app lost. What you doing, app? How did you lose him? So it's saying that this animate never got called. And so, and I feel like that was not, it was getting called before. And this is a bizarre thing, right? So are you saying that if I comment this out, no, it's still never getting to call animate. Just out of nowhere. Out of nowhere, it just decided it wasn't going to call animate anymore. And this sort of shows like a problem is that there's really no good way to get at this function to call it in the way this thing is written right now. Definitely isn't going to stay that way, but you know, like, what if I start it from scratch? Will it then call that? And this is kind of one of those things. Like I remember one place I worked, like you would run your tests and get 100% coverage locally, and then it would get run in the with the continuous integration system, and yeah, see now we have 100% the very first time. But then if we make any kind of change at all, after that it loses its 100%. Let me see. This gets so confusing because I have a mouse on my video and a mouse in real life. All right, so now if I were to make any changes at all, like if I go like this, and then hit save. Oh, now we still have 100%. See, that's weird. That's really weird. Now, honestly, that is like I've experienced that before where like it'll give 100% on CI/CD, but then like locally it doesn't give 100%, which is also like makes your job a lot harder if your company requires, like a lot of times they'll have these things called gates that won't let your code get committed unless all the gates pass, and it has to be 100%, and you're running locally and it's only getting like 85%, but then you run it in CI/CD and it gets 100%, and then you're like, oh crap, I don't know what to do, like to ensure this. It makes it very mysterious. And then what's worse is the other way around, where it gets 100% locally, but it won't get 100% on there. Those are some of the realities that you have to deal with, you know, just because people have these ideas in their head of wanting to get stuff. But, and then trying to explain that. Like what we just saw happen, we saw happen. It's caught in video, but trying to explain that like in a stand up or something is, oh my gosh, just about impossible. So anyway, so now we know we get a number, right? And and it is going to run this code, and now we want to get a renderer back. Um, so we'll just say it should return a number, a renderer. And it's really a an object. Like we're not trying to check that ThreeJS creates a renderer, like it's an object for a renderer D. So we want that, and then we don't really need this test, but then we want this constant renderer equals service get renderer for ID, and we'll give it the ID that we just got. Now, a lot of people would like write a test where it like expects the number one or something back, and I think that's a mistake, because like you may decide that you don't really in the future that, you know what, I don't want to start at one, I want to start at 100 or something like that. And like why would you want to break this? I think we could probably say truthy. Let's see if that works. And we're still at 100%. Don't know why it wasn't rendering. Like it was moving so quick that it was done before uh, it had time to run that. It will be interesting at this point to look at this thing and just see like how many times that line of code, six. So if you remember the other day, like in the past, if I remember correctly, this was like 14, and this is six this time, and it looks like um, before um, it was like it was zero. Like so this, so because basically what happens is this line of code here, this render set basically tells ThreeJS to use this function to to execute this function on every animation frame. So, and the animation frame is part of the browser. The browser tries to run this specific frame once every or 60 times a second, and and basically every time that happens, this function should execute. And for some reason, I think it was leaving before even a single animation frame. So it was all done in less than a 60th of a second. So that it never ran. Um, this time it was slow enough that it was um, only six times. And I don't really know. I don't really know exactly what what causes that. But the most important thing to take away from that is that this really needs to be a function that is accessible so that we can write a unit, if we're going to do unit testing, so that we can write a unit test that will hit it. And that's probably a really good practice. Anyways, like it'll make the code less easier to sort of think about. So this is the point in time that I look down and I see how I've done. And I'm just over 30 minutes. So like I'm at a C plus, I believe. What it was, 15 minutes was an A, 25 was a B. No, so I'm at a solid C. Um, so if I had, honestly, I could have looked down. It wouldn't surprise me if it had been 3 minutes or 4 minutes, and then I would be like, oh, okay, I have time to do the next thing. Which I think the next thing is to build out the beginning of the interfaces, because this is the moment where it is very very easy and to sort of understand how the renderer relates to the scene and the camera, like how those things were, how the scene relates to a mesh, how a mesh relates to a geometry, how a mesh relates to a material. This is easy to understand right now. It's very clear and all that. And this is sort of our way of saying this, when we put this into an interface, is something that we need to remember. Like, honestly, like I think all human beings have perfect memories. Like you could remember every single piece of text or number or anything like that. Any one of us, we just need to be able to tell our brain, I want you to remember this. But being able to tell the brain, having that sort of control. Like my wife, um, we can go to like a store and they'll be like, oh, okay, here's your invoice ID, your invoice, blah, blah, blah. And they'll give her a piece of paper and it'll have a little number in the upper right. And she can recall that a week later. You could say, like, we might have to go back and they were, oh, we're here to pick up this item, and they'll be like, oh, what's your invoice ID? And she'll be like, oh, and she'll kind of like look up and to the left and go like, oh, it's 875551 or something like that. She'll remember the invoice ID. Like you can remember whatever you want. You really can. You just have to have a system for telling your brain to remember things. And most people that have like these really, really great memories, they're taught something along those lines, either in their culture or in their family or something, to trigger memory when they need it. But most of us, like I did not have that. So like now I'm trying to sort of retrofit that into my brain. But this in code is how you say this is important. So how important is recyclable service and understanding that the recycle IDs array won't get populated when you do a second gener ID? It's not. I don't think it's of any actual functional use whatsoever to doing maintenance on this code. How important is it to understand how renderers relate to scenes and camera, how cameras relate to things, and how um, right now, like our camera is a perspective camera. So if you want the other kind of camera, it's a whole different kind of camera. But like if you want another kind of geometry, it is not a new kind of mesh. Like that really came in big last time, because like whenever I tried to create a new light, I would get a new ID, but when I'd go to create a new geometry, I wouldn't get a new ID. And that's because I would still have the same mesh ID. And I didn't understand that. And it made that code really, really screwy, especially the animation code. I think had I understood that fact, I would have been able to write the animation in a much more reasonable way. But anyways, now I'm probably in the D's. 34. Oh no. So happy coding, everybody. Bye.